Warning: this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. 2 Dobermans ate my entire body from the neck down, until I was nothing but bone. A compilation of the creepiest Reddit posts. Second life in a coma. My last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. Note: he was 325 pounds, I was 120 pounds, while unconscious on the ground. I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady, she made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years we got married and almost immediately she bore me a daughter. I had a great job and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, she, my wife, bore me a son. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. One day while sitting on the couch I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D but just wrong. It was a square lamp base, red with gold trim on 4 legs and a white square shade. I was transfixed, I couldn't look away from it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning I didn't go to work, something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating, I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first, soon I stopped that too as I wasn't eating or drinking. I stared at the lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. By this time my cognizance was breaking up and my wife was freaking out. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp is not real. The house is not real, my wife, my kids. None of that is real. The last 10 years of my life are not real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises and I became aware of pain. A ton of pain. The first words I said were "I'm missing teeth" and opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk surrounded by people that I didn't know. Lots were freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point a cop scooped me up, dragged and walked me across the sidewalk and grass and threw me face down in the back of a cop car. I was still confused. I was taken to the hospital by the cop. Seems he didn't want to wait for the ambulance to arrive and give CT scans and other tests. I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane as I would cry myself to sleep hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He is perpetually 5 years old and I can never hear what he says. Schizophrenic hallucination. A demon appeared on a door on my balcony and said, "You can't help me, no one can help me." When I went inside it moved up the wall onto the ceiling and said that it was coming back in 2 minutes to take me to hell. I started feeling a pulsing move up my left arm which led me to think I was going to have a heart attack. It came back and I was so scared that I ran out of my apartment. What followed was a situation that lasted in real life only about 2 days, but the timeline in the delusion lasted 6 months. At some point during the night the cops tased me about 10 miles from the house and my heart ended up stopping. In the delusion the demon had captured me and taken me to hell where I was chained and being forced to smash my head into a glass wall. In real life I was in someone's backyard trying to bash my head through their sliding glass door. Apparently the owner of the house tried to shoot me with a shotgun but missed. At some point I was too tired in the delusion, and fell to the ground. The demon continually told me that this was only going to get worse if I didn't continue. I had no energy so I gave up. 2 zombie-looking Dobermans came and ate my entire body from the neck down until I was nothing but bone. I watched my muscles and skin slowly grow back until I was whole and was told to continue smashing the window with my head. The window broke and I fell onto the bottom pane which cut me in half. I immediately was transported into a room that was unbearably hot. Each breath I took was a gasp and I couldn't get any air. There was someone in front of me holding a glass of water with condensation on it, but I only had enough strength to barely crawl towards it. Every time I got close enough to touch the glass the person took a step back. There was a clock on the wall and I watched 6 months go by. The only thought I had for this entire delusion was I am never getting out of here. No thoughts of my family or the past, just endless despair about never getting out. Eventually I got close enough and when my fingers touched the glass I was transported to another place. It was a void where there stood a massive black dragon with bright green eyes. The undersides of his wings were the same bright green. He moved his head towards me, which was about 3 times the size of my entire body, and whispered, "It is only going to get worse from here." Then he spewed a black smoke from his nostrils that entered my ear. The next thing I experienced can only be described like this: imagine having 5,000 copies of yourself that are all having the most intense mind-splitting migraine that you could never imagine. But all those minds are happening inside of your mind. I lost all sense of existence in the pain. Then I was in space staring at the earth, and in my own voice I heard the words, "You created all of this." Then I woke up and was strapped into a hospital bed in the ICU. I looked like someone had dragged me behind a car naked, just covered in gashes and wounds. For a long time I was completely traumatized, but those last words actually have changed my entire life. I know now that my entire reality is created by my mind, and knowing that I no longer fear anything. I think that when people die they release a huge amount of DMT, which causes a time-dilated dream state. Depending on what you were thinking before death, in my case going to hell, that is exactly what happens. From the time I saw the demon to when I woke up only 2 days went by, but I was in hell for 6 months. I have one more story that happened more recently, and I'll put it here if anyone wants to hear it. The first instance was pretty hard to get past. I actually just tried to push it out of my mind for a while until eventually my ex said something that made me want to look into it. She said to me, "Swindlers, you never seem happy, you always just seem like you are trying to survive." That hit something in me, so I decided to start looking back into what happened, and did some research on near-death experiences. Come to find out only about 5% of them are hell experiences. I thought that was odd, so I looked up an NDE support group. 1 week before I went to that group, I had the second experience. I've learned since that what I attempt to understand I give value to, and therefore energy which is capable of manifestation. Now I just try to hold as little weight to it as I can, and hopefully one day I'll be able to have a normal life and relationship again. The cheating wife. I'm having a hard time coping with my wife having cheated on me with our neighbor. It has been 476 days since I confronted her about it. How do I know? Because every time I catch myself thinking about it I tell myself, it's only been X days, maybe you won't think about it tomorrow. So to go back to the beginning, I had just taken on a new project and new responsibilities at work. I was working a lot of hours, 60 plus per week, and was noticeably stressed. It was in May of 2015 that I noticed that she had added a password to her phone. When confronted about it, she told me it was because she was planning my Father's Day present and didn't want me to ruin the surprise. About a week later she came to me and told me that she felt guilty keeping a big secret from me, and told me that she was having our neighbor, a contractor, build a home office for me as my present. It struck me as odd, as in our 6 years together she has never said she felt guilty about anything, and always insists that she never regrets anything in her life. Time goes on, her phone is still password protected, and things don't feel right. I see her using her phone and smiling to herself more and more often. But when I ask her what she is doing, she says nothing and puts her phone away. So one morning I wait for her to get in the shower and I grab her phone before it requires the password. I go through her messages and find that she is texting the neighbor, "I am all covered in frosting, you wanna lick it off?" There were no other messages to the neighbor, but I found out later that was because she had set up her phone to delete messages after a certain amount of time. I felt uncomfortable with it, but I knew she had a perverted sense of humor and I thought she would never do anything to hurt me. More time goes by and the neighbor is spending more and more time at our house, but the office is being completed slower and slower. I can't help but worry that something isn't right, so I start checking her location using Google Timeline. It was at this point that I realized that there are large gaps in her GPS history because she was turning off her phone's GPS. Fast forward to July, and at this point the paranoia is driving me nuts, so I tell her that I need to install new antivirus on her phone. While she has it unlocked for me, I install anti-theft software so I can remotely turn the GPS back on, and set up AT&T message backup and restore, so I can read all of her text messages from that point on my computer. The next day my mother asks to spend time with my 2 kids, so my wife drops them off with her and has the day to herself. I watch my wife's activity from work as she spends the day trying to meet up with the neighbor but is unsuccessful because he is busy with another job site. That night we get the kids back from my mom's house and we go out to dinner with the neighbor, his girlfriend, and his son. My wife and his girlfriend are having a good time drinking, laughing, and just joking around. His girlfriend mentions that she would like to see Magic Mike XXL. I say it's a good idea, I'll watch the kids so my wife and her can go. So my wife and her go and the neighbor and I go back to my house so the kids can play video games together. The kids are back in my son's room playing games and the neighbor is sitting across from me on the other couch. It is at this point that my wife starts texting him. She is describing sex acts she would like to perform with him and he is reciprocating. She tells him to check his Snapchat and at the same time I get a Snapchat from her too and it is her fingering herself in a bathroom stall. They keep talking, trying to figure out when they can meet up and have sex. They decide on Monday morning after I go to work. So in my head I had already planned to pretend to leave and circle back to catch them. But then they tell each other that they love each other and it is all I can do to not leap off the couch and knock him out. But I contain myself and continue reading the conversation unfolding in front of me. Then he tells her, "You're my girl now," to which she replies, "Always have been," ending with him writing, "and always will be." My wife and the neighbor's girlfriend return from the movie and I ask them, politely, to sit down. I then ask the kids to stay in my son's room and shut the door. I return to the living room and confront my wife and the neighbor. I say, "So you two love each other, huh?" My wife goes into full-blown denial mode and the neighbor's girlfriend starts smacking him. I ask my wife if she has been texting him. She says no. So I show her the text messages. She admits to it but says it was the first time it had gone that far. I ask my wife if she has sent him pictures. She says no. So I show her the picture. She admits it but says it was the first time. I ask her if she is having sex with him and she says no. Because I didn't wait to catch them having sex together, I didn't have evidence to prove her wrong, so that one stayed unresolved. I tell her that I am leaving her. She tells me that she will make sure I never see my kids again if I do. She planned on using the fact that I had attempted suicide in high school to prove me unfit to have the children. She continues to say that it was my fault for being so busy with work and stressed out, that she just wanted someone she could talk to. Then she gives me an ultimatum to decide what I'm going to do or she will decide for me. The neighbor's girlfriend starts defending the two of them, saying that it couldn't have been serious if they weren't having sex and that my wife and I are too perfect together to let this break us up. The neighbors go home and my wife and I argue for the rest of the night about what we are going to do. We go to bed separately, having not resolved anything. We keep going back and forth on the subject all weekend and finally settle on we were going to separate temporarily while we figure out what we want. I was going to stay in the house and she was going to take the kids and go to her mom's house. That Monday I go to work and I get text from her in the middle of a meeting with my bosses stating that she had explained things to our kids, but that they were upset and I need to explain it to them also. I get home from work to find my kids crying. She had told them that mommy had to move out because dad was mad at her. When my son wanted to stay with me, she told him that he can't. My son put it together that if mommy has to move out because I'm mad at her and he must move out, then I must have been mad at him too. My daughter was crying because my son was. I don't think she was old enough to understand what was happening. It was at that moment I realized she was going to drag the kids through hell if I left her, so I swallowed my feelings and begged her to stay. She agreed and insisted that I apologize to our neighbor since we were still going to need to hang out with them because our sons are good friends. I hate it but I do it anyway. We still hang out with them from time to time and they come to our various birthday and holiday parties. But I do anything for my kids and I behave civil every time. Things die down for a while. I still think about it constantly. I worry how can I keep from making her so unhappy that she cheats on me again. Then almost a year from the original incident, around Father's Day again, she sent him pictures again. She claims it was an accident, that she meant to send them to me instead. I don't fully believe her but I move on anyway. Things have been quiet on that front for about 4 months now but I still think about it constantly. This is going to sound stupid but I feel like I have a part of my brain that I can't shut off, that is always thinking. I used to use that to solve programming problems and it made me very good at my job. But ever since this incident, the only thing it thinks about is her and him, and if I did the right thing. My job performance has suffered and I feel like I haven't gotten sleep in months. I'm afraid that after this much time, and the fact that I begged her back, that to say that I want a divorce now would only make her more vindictive towards my children and I just feel like I have put myself so deep in a hole that I can never get back out. I haven't really talked to anyone about this. I didn't want to talk to my mom about it because I felt she would treat my wife differently and I didn't need the two fighting any more than they already do. I tried talking to one friend about it but his advice was to put my trust in God, but that was not much solace for me as I am an atheist. So I have no clue what to do with my feelings or how to move on from this. The aftermath. Worley, 30, is charged with the murder of her 7-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter. Police were called to the home on South Madison Street on November 17 after Worley called 911 and told the dispatcher, "I just stabbed myself and killed my children." According to the documents, Worley told police her husband was divorcing her and going to take the children. She said, "I did not want him taking them, so I stabbed them." Worley's husband filed for divorce on Wednesday. Worley used a knife to kill Tyler, 7, and Charlie, 3, according to court documents. Both children were found inside the girls' bedroom with stab wounds to their neck. Police found a Cobra-style combat knife on the floor of the room. Brandy Worley told police, "I did not want him to take my kids, I just wanted to die with them." Brandy's husband, Jason, was awakened by Brandy's mother screaming, and when he walked upstairs he told police that Brandy said to him, "Now you can't take the kids from me." Autopsies were performed on the children at Terre Haute Regional Hospital. The coroner determined the cause of death for each child was stab wounds to the neck. The Whistler. I've been waiting a long time to tell Reddit the full story of the Whistler. This story requires many details, but it is unexplainable, creepy, and 100% true. I also have video evidence. When I was about 8 years old, I was taking my dog for a walk through the neighborhood with my mom. It was maybe 11 p.m. We live next to a swamp and woods area on the edge of our neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. I remember it being very silent and slightly windy. From down in the swamp we heard somebody whistling at us. It sounded sort of like a bird, but each whistle was different enough where the lack of consistency made it human-like. The whistle sounded higher, then lower. I can't really describe it. My mom had a concerned, slightly terrified look on her face and grabbed my hand and said that we should go inside quickly. I didn't understand because I was too young, but seeing my mom freak out made me freak out too. After a while, though, I kind of forgot about it. 2 years later, I was taking my dog out again, late at night. There is a large bush that could easily obscure a person behind it, just next to the front door. As I was finishing the walk, the whistling noise started again, same pitches, same inconsistent, human-like tones. As soon as I heard it, a chill went down my spine as I remembered exactly the feeling of seeing my mom, terrified, looking down into the swamp at something I couldn't see. Maybe she couldn't either. I ran inside as fast as possible. Years went by and I thought about it less and less. I told only a handful of people, and eventually it slipped from my mind. Fast forward to last summer, I'm 24, started dating my girl Sarah. We moved out to South Dakota for work. For Independence Day, we decided to go to Pierre, South Dakota and watch the fireworks along the bank of the Missouri River. There was a free camping spot behind a hospital where you could pitch your tent, hang out, and see the fireworks up the river. We were near the end of the campground and there were very few people around us. As it was getting dark, the fireworks began. They were pretty far away, so the illumination they brought was very little. Thus, we had to sit right at the edge of the river to be able to see them. A huge thunderhead was moving in and a storm was imminent, so the air seemed electric and the wind was picking up. The atmosphere was eerie to say the least. The police boats herded all the other boats off of the river and had left our area to do that elsewhere. Most of the other campers walked up the river to have a better view of the fireworks, but Sarah and I stayed back and were drinking PBR tallboys and kicking it. Suddenly, we heard the sound of a paddle methodically dipping into the water. We saw a figure steering a canoe about 20 meters offshore. Sarah decided to go get more beers from the car, leaving me alone to stare at this mystery person. And then, of course, they whistled at me. My entire body was frozen and covered in goosebumps. It was the exact same whistler from my childhood, more than a decade earlier. I looked at the figure, but it was much too dark to discern who it could be. They were wearing a hat. When they were perpendicular to the shore from me, they stopped paddling, turned the canoe to face directly at me, and whistled right at me. I was so frightened I stood up and shouted at them, "Who are you?" They didn't say anything, just whistled a couple more times, turned the canoe 180 degrees, and paddled out of sight. I'm a videographer, so I already had my camera by my side and was taking video of the fireworks. As the canoe was almost out of sight, I grabbed my camera and got a shot of them whistling as they went away. When Sarah came back from getting beers, she was very confused as to why I was so freaked out. When I explained, she was freaked out a bit too. I was convinced we would both be murdered that night. How did this whistling person follow me, after 14 years, all the way to South Dakota? Was it a coincidence? Why was it the same whistling noise? Who was that person and where did they go? So many questions still unanswered. To this day I'm more afraid of being outside in the dark where I might hear that whistling again. I'm open to any explanations. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button for more creepy Reddit videos. Click the right box for the related playlist and find the original link in the video description if you want to know more about these stories. The Whistler video is also linked in the description.